Hi all, my name is Manuel Tender. Thank you very much to the organization of BIM Coordinators Summit. I'm here to talking a little about of one of the uses for BIM. This is my area, Occupational Safety and Health Management. I'm a civil engineer. I got a PhD in the area of health and safety. I'm a lead researcher in BIM for occupational safety and health. We can call it OSH management. That's Digital for OSH. I'm the lead researcher. Digital for OSH is a research project related to the use of digital technologies for OSH in construction. Digital for OSH is a partnership between Portuguese and UK institutions, academic and industry. ISWA from Portugal and university, Loughborough University from UK, University of Minho from Portugal, Xpoly Engineering from Portugal, and BIM's management also from Portugal. We got a governance and an advisory panel external that is keeping some advice on us about this area, BIM people and OSH people. And why should we talk about BIM in OSH management? Because when you talk about OSH management, we talk about accidents at work, we talk about occupational diseases. And these kind of things have a considerable financial and logistical impact on companies. We are dealing with the safety of people, of trying to people not get hurt in the construction sites, and trying that people do not get ill in construction sites. But it's not easy. It's usually there's a gap between prevention of risks and production. It's always a dilemma. But we should not forget that the European directive, when they talk about the general principles of prevention, talks about taking in account the state of evolution of the technique, namely in terms of information technologies. And that's this way why BIM is an important step for health and safety. And we know, because it's not a new theme in health and safety area, that BIM has some potential to optimize our OSH management. And if we are talking about integrating BIM in OSH area and integrating OSH through BIM, we are talking about creating new capabilities in the players, namely because it's going to appear a BIM safety coordinator that it will work with the BIM team, BIM coordinator, BIM manager, and also in the contractors, we are going to have the need of having someone talking about health and safety through BIM. We all know that accidents at work, it's not a very easy and pleasant thing to talk about, mainly when someone gets hurt. When someone gets hurt, we've got some costs to the company also. We've got direct costs, we've got indirect costs. Some costs we can see, some costs we cannot see. And we know that those that we cannot see, indirect costs, are much bigger, higher than direct costs. And this is also a main point for the companies, because when somebody gets hurt, when somebody stops their usual work, this is going beyond someone gets hurt and has familial and social consequences for him. There are consequences also for the companies. So it's an important theme for companies. We all know this graphic, and we all know that we can link also the idea of that the potential to influence and prevent construction injuries decreases exponentially as the project progresses. So the same way as we have the importance of being in earlier stages of the design of the project, we also know that it's very important to integrate health and safety in that point. There's already some research done about this theme. I've got this table just to remind some of the papers that were already published since 2011. There are some countries with some very mature knowledge about these applications of BIM in the health and safety area. Just to name it, UK, USA, Germany, China, Spain. There are some countries doing some nice things with this methodology, and that's what I'm going to talk about. And the first thing that I would like to talk about was the normative document that UK has launched, the PAS 1192 Part 6 in 2018, that specifies the collaborative sharing and use of structured health and safety information using BIM. UK was a pioneer. It was one of the first countries directing doing this approach to health and safety area. And with that this document, it says that there's a theory gap in understanding how to develop, use, and apply these tools within information system and digital processes. So this document sets out to bridge this gap, explains how health and safety can be identified, shared, and used by the key players. And this document explains and shows in four main areas: the risk information cycle, some implementation strategies for the actors, some information about requisites implementation, and how do we represent health and safety (HOS) in the documents. So this document gives us some topics that are very important: the use of CDE for information sharing, the integration of HOS information in the employee's information requirements and in the BIM execution plan, to have an open standard for deliverables, and he explains, he indicates some outputs that we must have when we work HOS through BIM. And some of them are method statement, the 3D model, the 4D model, animated, risk assessment, risk zones, work permits, temporary works. It's a main topic about the BIM used for health and safety, class detection, and as-built drawings. These are some of the outputs that we must have in the topic of HOS when we use 3D, 4D model. This document also talks about include emergency planning in a model, include information for operation and maintenance, and using lessons learned. Implementation strategies. What does this document say? That the approach shall fit the complexity of works. Each stakeholder shall assess CDE, ERE, and BIM execution plan requisites and ensure compatibility between elements. And each stakeholder shall incorporate and implement their own work and data. So we've got strategy for project owner, strategy for designers, and just let me detail, because it's very important, the responsibility of the designer to have safe solution of design for construction, for commissioning, for operation, to have an early involvement of contractors, suppliers, and facility managers. It also said that each designer integrates safety solution in their piece of project, that we have to have an early risk detection, to include constructability and temporary works in design, and include emergency events. For contractors, what does this say? That we've got to use the design information as a starting point, to register risk information, to include in the model these topics, to use this information for future works, and to, very important, involve supply chain during a process. And when we say involving other actors during the process, it's very important. And for facility managers, it's also important, in this case, to be involved in the design phase. It's one of the gap in lots of countries, that they are not called for the design phase, and then we face some problems when we go to the facility management. In terms of the supply chain, it's very important that each supplier shares its own data. So how do we include OSH information in a model? We can include it, and I'm going to describe two ways of doing that. The first is to put the information in an object in a parameterized way. When I click in each object, in this case, in terms of health and safety, I can have the risk for fall from height, when it will appear, and I can have the preventive measures. Okay? But I can also link this information to other documents, to PDFs, to health and safety plans, health and safety files, to DWB, or other way. I also can register this information through COBie sheets. It's one of the way and very important for facility management. I also can do it direct in a more graphic way in the 3D model. Okay, just like a triangle, and I'm talking about BIM safe. I could be talking of another. We can do a triangle, a pictogram here, and when I click the pictogram, I get some information about the risks that are associated with, for example, with that zone. So now I'm going to describe some areas where BIM is very important in terms of OSH, and I'm going to begin to the contractual management. Okay, when we usually have an inadequate organization of docs, I'm asking myself lots of times, am I working in the most actual version of doc? Sometimes files are not compatible, there's information clash or duplication, and there's a language barrier. And why this is important? Because when I have a common data environment, I can put all the information about health and safety, about workers, method statements, equipment in this environment. So it gets accessible to every actors. And in ER and BEP, I can also, and I should include the OSH information. How am I going to include OSH information in the BIM model? And I get this way, these versions centralized, controlled, the information and the documents are more controlled, and my documents, my most important documents, health and safety plan and health and safety file, I can optimize their use. So this is the advantages for contractual management. I got the cost control, and usually OSH costs are not included in global cost, and it's very difficult to control protective equipment, signaling, guardrails, etc., etc. And if I use BIM, I can get OSH budget as a separate item, as I have here. I've got automatic measurements of each item, of guardrails, of signaling, of construction site elements. I can attribute a value to each one of the items, and in the final, I can get a budget for health and safety. Without BIM, this would not be so accurately possible. So I can know the OSH actual cost in any moment, and I get less time spent in budgeting. In terms of risk management usually is verbal, it's based in personal experience, it's a manual activity, and it's error prone. And usually we got an absence of OSH approach in design phase. So if we use BIM, the first major change that I have is that OSH is beginning in the design phase. So the designer begins the 3D model, and we are going to have the possibility to include OSH information in that phase. We got a better capacity of hazard, risk, and preventive measure identification, and this is one of the main points that people indicate where BIM is useful for OSH. We can identify in a better way the critical periods and critical zones and conditionalisms, and I can, with some instruments like Dynamo, do an automation of risk assessment. In terms of training, and the Finnish VTT Finnish Research Center is talking about this since 2011. It's not so recent. It's a very important part of OSH management. Usually, without BIM, we got the language barrier. Trainings are static, are passive, are no realistic, and with lots of time constraints. And with BIM, we get a more agile, a more quick communication between who is giving the trainer and who is receiving the trainer. And I can minimize the linguistic barrier. And this is very important when we got a construction site, when we got workers from the workers that are talking 10 different languages. So the graphic model showing a 3D, a 4D simulation can give me the opportunity to reach in a quicker way the minds of that workers. About site planning, construction site usually it's not included in drawing. Temporary facilities are not usually considered, and there are some special and temporary incompatible tasks. When I use BIM, I get some pre-model objects. I can get the construction site direct in the model, and this gives me the opportunity to do space and volume optimization, to understand better spaces and critical shadows, to integrate temporary facilities, a crane, in a 3D model, to understand in a better way the conditionalisms, the traffic that it's around my site, the neighborhood, if I'm doing a building in the center of the town, like our town, port, and I can have the safety perimeters also from a crane. About each task planning, what can we say? Without BIM, we usually have, and it's one of the major difficulties in our area, a gap between production planning and safety planning. Also with lots of manual and error-prone work. And when we do some planning changes, this not translate in safety changes. But if I use the 3D model, okay, I got less errors, there's more credibility, the information, I've got a better plan capacity, I can do a comparison between what is planned and what is actual, the temporary works can be better detailed, I got a crash detection, and if my construction manager does a planning change, it automatically becomes a change in the model in terms of safety. So it's easier for me to understand what is the consequence of having a planning change. About monitoring tasks, it's one of a paper-based activity, and if we use a 3D model, name with tablets and other kind of devices in construction sites, I can get more detailed inspections, I can get anticipated visualization, and it's usual, for example, to do the non-conformities management in real time. In terms of collective protection, like guardrails, and I also I put here the example of VTT that it's doing this for many years, the modeling of guardrails that usually are not well understood in the 2D drawing, and sometimes there's omission of some elements. And if I use BIM, it's more easy for me to get visualization of what guardrails or safety nets I'm going to use, where it's needed, when it's needed, and if there's any clash management. In terms of emergency planning, BIM allows me to do something that I would not do without BIM, that it's doing a simulation of scenarios, realistic scenarios, to do in an automatic way evacuation routes, and to optimize rescue procedures and firefighting, for example, firefighting equipment positioning. In terms of accident investigation, BIM allows us to have a more easy reconstruction of each scenario, because if I don't use BIM, I can do a 2D approach and mental approach about the reconstruction of the scenario, like this drawing. And if I have BIM, I can do a 3D reconstruction of 4D reconstruction of scenario to better understanding the framework, and I can organize a database of accidents more easily. And the most important, understand what and how each accident happened. So, in terms of the aspects of BIM that improve site safety, it's that data from Dodge 2017. It's the identifying potential site hazards in an earlier phase before construction begins, and also the clash detection. Just to say that it's a new approach, so OSH actors are going to need to upgrade skills. We are going to need a requalification of the actors in terms of general skills, specific skills, physical skills, socio-emotional skills. That it's something that BIM implies when I implement it in a company. So, in terms of conclusion, we got a paradigm shift in OSH management. I can optimize OSH in design phase, and I can get a better connection between production and safety. There are some challenges common to other BIM areas. The project owner does not have a BIM as compulsory. The OSH intervenients do not have knowledge about tools, are resistant to changes, have return of investment, this knowledge. How do I integrate the OSH information in a model? What's the best way to parameterize, to put it in a graphic way in the model? We are trying to understand from the experience of some countries what is the best way. Most part of the applications of BIM for OSH are focused in fall from high risks, so we must develop the other risks. The challenge is retrieving what other countries are doing, and there are some mature countries that are doing some applications of BIM for health and safety that are very interesting. And this kind of information, how do we face it? How did we face it? Like a Digital for OSH research group. We created, we call it BIM for OSH Observatory, that it's being launched, where it's an instrument, it's going to be a platform where we are going to look for the applications of BIM for OSH through a barometer. It's going to be an European barometer of how each country is doing the implementation, and if people accept or do not accept. And also it will be an opportunity to have a platform, a collaborative platform, to having lessons learned from that country that are mature. Now we have created a consortium between some countries, some European countries. We are launching the project, and I hope I can share some information about this project soon. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask. Okay, thank you very much.